Hello everybody and welcome to Tutor Classics, a project offering more resources for students of Latin, Greek and classical civilization. For more information, resources, and if you're looking for further tuition, head over to tutorclassics.com. So today we're going to look at one of the very basics of Latin and all inflected languages, and that is cases. Without a full knowledge of cases, you will never be able to read and understand the rhetorical genius of Cicero, the grand beauty of Virgil, the subversive playfulness of Ovid, and a world without these writers would be a very sad one indeed. Cases, as we call them, are part of a system of inflection. An inflected language is a language that adds or changes letters to the beginnings and ends of words to modify its meaning. Ancient languages, such as Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit, are fully inflected, so that every word is modified in some way, but even modern European languages keep some inflection. For example, if we look at this object, we would call this a horse. In French, cheval, in Spanish, caballo, in Italian, cavallo. If there are more than one, we would say horses, chevaux, caballos, or cavalli. So you can see in modern European languages that if we want to make something plural, that is to show that there are more than one, which is singular, we add letters to it. S in the case of English and Spanish, or we change the letter. O to I in Italian, al to O in French. For nouns in these languages, that is about as complicated as it gets in terms of inflection. Languages such as French, Italian, Spanish, and English tend to use word order to specify the role the noun is playing in the clause, or adds extra words in front of a noun. I'm going to give an example here using common entrance vocabulary. The Greeks transported food for the Romans with ships. The first noun is placed first to tell us that this is the noun performing the verb. We call it the subject. The second noun is placed after the verb to tell us that this is what is being affected by the verb. We call this the direct object. The next noun, Romans, has the preposition for in front of it to tell us that it is the indirect object. It is indirectly affected by the verb, since they will have the food once it has been transported. The third noun, ships, has got the preposition with in front of it to tell us it is the instrument. It is the means by which this transportation is done. What I want to show you here is how modern English uses a combination of word order and prepositions to tell us how to interpret how the words are being used. In inflected languages, such as Latin and Greek, however, we just add different endings to nouns to tell us the same information. These endings are called cases. So, to show subject, Latin uses the nominative case. To show object, it uses the accusative case. For indirect object, we use the dative case, and instrument is the ablative case. Now, if we were to write this in Latin and just use the nouns as we find them in the common entrance vocab list, our sentence would look like this. Graecus portabant cibus Romanus navis. Now, this makes absolutely no sense in Latin because nouns in vocab lists are given in the nominative singular case. The nominative case, as I said before, tells us that this particular noun is the subject, i.e. the one doing the verb. Not all of these nouns can be the subject. We therefore have to modify the endings to modify the roles of the nouns. So, Graecus is in the nominative case because it is the subject, but it is plural, so we have to give it the nominative plural ending. Graecus becomes Graeci. Cibus needs to be in the accusative case because that is the case of the direct object, so that becomes cibum. Romanus needs to be plural because there are multiple Romans, and also needs to be in the dative case because it is the indirect object. Romanus then becomes Romanis. Finally, navis needs to be plural and ablative to show it is the instrument. Navis therefore becomes navibus. So now we can write this sentence in proper Latin. Graeci portabant cibum Romanis navibus. Now this is not natural Latin word order. Generally, the word order is to place the subject first, then the direct object, then the extra information, and the verb at the end. So that then becomes Graeci cibum Romanis navibus portabant. And there you have basic Latin word order, complete with correct cases to convey the meaning perfectly, elegantly, and succinctly. It's a work of art. Job done. Let's go home. But we can take this one step further, and for GCSE and A-level students and all you keen beans out there, this next bit will be particularly helpful. Now, the really cool thing about Latin and inflected languages is that because we have the endings, the word order is much less important to meaning, and we can therefore order the words to create different effects. This is where we enter the world of literary criticism, which you have to write about and analyze in your GCSE and A-level set text exams. Let us imagine the different kinds of people who might be saying this sentence, and their different situations and their different aims. Perhaps we have a shipbuilder who's trying to persuade someone to buy more ships off him. Or we might have a Greek diplomat on an embassy to Rome trying to seek help against invaders. Or a historian, such as Tacitus or Livy, recording a moment of history. When word order isn't necessary for meaning, it still has use for emphasis. The first word and final word of a sentence are particularly emphatic places for words, especially if they are different from the natural word order. So, if the first word is anything other than a nominative, it is particularly emphatic, and if the last word is anything other than the verb, it is also emphatic. This is logical, since obviously the first and last things we as human beings hear are always the most memorable. The stuff in between is all filler and no killer. So, our shipbuilder wants to emphasize the importance of ships to promote his business. He might say, Navibus, Graeci Romanis cibum portabant. By placing navibus at the beginning of the sentence, he promotes the idea of ships in the minds of his prospective customers. Our Greek diplomat is trying to emphasize how the Greeks have helped the Romans in the past to make them obliged to help the Greeks out now, in their time of crisis. He might say, Romanis cibum portabant navibus Graeci. By placing Romanis at the beginning, he stresses the idea that the Romans have benefited, and by delaying the subject all the way to the end, he emphasizes that it was the Greeks themselves that were the ones to help the Romans. Our historian, who is interested in action, might place his verb at the beginning of the sentence to bring out the great effort the Greeks made in bringing food to the Romans. Portabant, Graeci navibus Romanis cibum. By placing cibum at the end of the sentence, he is emphasizing the importance of food in this particular situation. Perhaps the Romans are besieged by enemies and are starving, for example. Persuasion is one of language's primary purposes. We all use it every day in our lives. Politicians use it to get elected. Business people use it to sell products and services. We use it in arguments with our friends and with our enemies. What we can see with inflected languages is that once you shake off the necessity of word order to create meaning, you can use word order as a tool to create persuasive or dramatic effects. And that is truly the coolest thing about Latin, and why reading people like Cicero and Ovid, who are masters of the art, get me out of bed in the morning. So there you have it. You can see now how Latin and other inflected languages use cases on their nouns instead of word order to modify the roles of word in a sentence. And once this has been done, word order itself becomes a rhetorical tool to create effects. In the next videos, we will go deeper into all the different kinds of cases in Latin, what they look like, and how they are used. Until then, you can go to tutorclassics.com for more resources specific to UK Classics exams, or get in touch about Classics tuition. See you next time.